Okay, welcome to the Leadership Talk Show. I'm your host, Victor Vogel. We really only have a couple of rules on the talk show. One of them is we don't provide any personal names on anybody or any organizations or the names of any business or office or whatever it might be. And that's really because we're just trying to talk about the behaviors associated with leadership. And we're trying to help people improve. And the second rule is um, if you have a grievance or a gripe or something like that, this isn't probably the place to bring that up. There are forums for that. This isn't one of them. We're really just about helping leaders and helping improve things. So uh, we'd like to refrain from doing that on the program if possible. So anyway, I want to welcome you to the program tonight. Notice my background's a little different here. I want to let you know I'm coming from the Cayman Islands, the Grand Cayman Islands. And no, I'm just kidding. I'm not really, but I wish I was. And so I found my photo of this picture here in my file. So I put it up here. Uh, and if you ever get to go to the Grand Cayman Islands, this is one of the things you want to do. This is where they get a lot of boats and they come out to this one area, which is really a big sandbar, but it's about waist to a chest deep. I mean, I'm 6'3", so it's about waist deep for me. Some people would probably be almost up to their chest. And what they do is they carry bait for stingrays. The stingrays are those fish or amphibians that are just like large winged. They look like large winged animals, and they have a long, narrow stinger and coming out the back. And they take food on these boats, and you go out to this island, and you can literally put the food in the palm of your hand, hold it out there, and the stingray will come up and suck the food out of your hand and eat. So you get a chance to feed the stingrays. And they may have had a couple of people stung, but I can't remember when that has happened last. And it certainly didn't happen while we were there. It was really a great experience. And so you have that sandbar out to where you see that boat over on the left-hand side of your screen, most likely. Then it gets a little darker green, kind of a blue-green. It's a little deeper. And then you go out where that blue is, and it just like takes a huge drop. And I mean, we're talking about probably thousands of feet deep, kind of deep. But it's really a beautiful area. Cayman Islands they're not a real place where you go to have a lot of gambling or nightlife or entertainment. They have nightlife there, but it's kind of more laid back. So it is a very, very relaxing island to go to if you want to. But anyway, we're not talking about the Cayman Islands tonight, although I thought you might find that interesting. If I were going to hold a retreat for something like we're talking about tonight, I'd want to do it on this island right here. So get your drink, relax. We're going to talk about branding leaders tonight, branding leadership. So we want you to jump in there. And if you happen to be out there and you want to join, or you got an invitation you want to join, you simply need to enter that into the URL. Click on it, download the Zoom. I recommend downloading the Zoom app onto your computer or your iPhone, wherever you happen to be, because that's going to give you a lot more flexibility in interacting with us. If you want to be on screen, you just want to be camera ready. You don't have to be dressed up or anything, but you kind of need to have clothes on. And you want to probably put a headset or your Apple earbuds in or something like that and plug it into your phone or your computer so that we don't have a feedback on the program. But outside of that, it's pretty simple. Once you let me know you're out there by clicking into the program, then you'll go into what's called a waiting room, and then I'll click on you and join me. You can actually be live on screen here with me while we're going through this, talking about branding leadership. So let me share my screen here with you for a second. There we go. And we are talking about branding your leadership. And you're probably asking, if you're like me, you know, for years and years and years, I had no idea about branding your leadership. If somebody would have told me this like 35 years ago or 40 years ago when I was in the business, I probably would have been a lot better off than I am right now, for sure. So that's interesting area, that this is a fairly new area, but an extremely, extremely important area. So to kind of give you an idea what we're talking about when we say branding your leadership, you know, companies brand their leadership. When you see marketing, you see advertising, you see certain things that speak to their organization. But it's normally about the product or the service they're offering. And a lot of times people don't understand that the leadership and the employees and the infrastructure of that organization should really be focused on how that organization brands itself. So I went out and I found somebody I thought that has branded themselves pretty well, and it seemed to have stuck. So let me show you that right now. Probably no surprise to you that that was Apple's brand. And the way they manage and operate and the leadership of that organization is pretty much about the same. They tend to, if you weren't picking things up there, and I hope you were, because it's pretty phenomenal brand when you think about it. It's not being the first on the scene. It's not actually being the newest thing. It's just perhaps discovering the thing that's never been discovered before. And to step out away and be different from everything else, but have a focus for that difference being on betterment of the world and what you can contribute to the world being better out there for folks. So it gets you get pretty clear definition of where Apple is coming from as a corporation, and you can see their products go that way. They don't necessarily introduce a new product every year, but they do have a lot of innovation and a lot of change and a lot of things that are different from everybody else when it does come out. And consequently, what you see is a following. People understand or they see Apple, they know what to expect from Apple. You have a following of Apple and iOS people who that's their brand. That's how they go about communicating in the world today. And they don't even want to think about moving over to any of the others, no matter how new or whatever those things are. It's such a locked in program, and they were the first in the market. So that adds a lot to the program. But more importantly, what they brought first was something that was totally different, significantly different than anything that's ever been out there. And they haven't lost that from that standpoint. So I just thought that would be interesting for you to see, to kind of get an idea. Now, if you want to transfer that over and think about that, think about that kind of image as a leader. Something people can understand, they can see, they can get their arms around. It's not a surprise to them. It's clear, it's focused, it's predictable. Those are all really cool things that you would look for also in a leader. So let's take a look at some key points about branding leadership out there. And again, if you're out there and you want to hop in and join us and participate, we can dialogue about this right behind these slideshows that we're going to be doing. So some key points. First of all, and think about whatever position you're in or whatever position you're aspiring to. There's some things you can think about here. Branding is your strategic actions that inspire, empower, and equip those that you lead. Okay, this is not about you. This is about things that are outside of you, away from you, that you're impacting. When you're branding, you're describing to people that strategic action that inspires them, empowers them, and equips them to follow you. That's a pretty powerful statement. A lot of these statements are coming from resources that I'm going to put into the description, by the way, so that you can go to those and you can look at them and learn. And there are many more outside the ones I'm going to give you. Once you get on this trail, I'm sure you can follow it to the end. If you don't understand, if you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing. And people won't know what to expect from you. And that's a powerful statement. I actually stole that statement from a lawyer here in Michigan. I saw him say it on TV, and it is a pretty phenomenal statement when you think about it. If you don't stand for something, then you stand for nothing. Now, the consequence of that is people just don't understand you. They can't quite figure you out. It's not a position you want to be in as a leader with people who you want following you. You develop a personal brand around how you lead. not who you are, but how you lead. What that, of course, that will be a lot about who you are, but it's all in what people see you doing that makes a difference. The personal brand is the outward representation of who the leader is on the inside. Okay. So once again, these are the behaviors. These are the things I've been emphasizing for 8 weeks, and why I'm so excited about not talking with leadership experts, so to speak, but talking with people who are leaders at the basic level, people who work for leaders or employed by them, people who are, in fact, following somebody to have a leader, to have a boss. These people are the people who are impacted by your behaviors, and those behaviors are a representation of who you are from the inside. So knowing who you are is critical, and we talked about that very much in that first show I did when we first started kicking this leadership series off about culture and power bases and those kinds of things. Stakeholders and followers play an important role in branding your leadership. How they react to the leader, either inspired or resistant, says a lot about a leader's brand. So your stakeholders, the people who you're serving, your employees, your customers, your organization, whoever you are serving, how they feel about you, how they react to you, speaks volumes about you as a leader. I used to, I spent a lot of time just thinking about and working inside the fast food industry. And I used to go in and say, you can literally tell the quality of the leader, the brand of the leader, if you will, from the employees the minute you walk in the door. You walk in the door and you watch what's going on around that restaurant. You can tell the brand of that manager, the quality of that manager, the inner self of that manager right there when you walk in the door. It's pretty phenomenal. I did a lot of work with franchisees in a fast food restaurant, and they couldn't believe that you could use that measurement to say a lot, and you could watch your customers also at the same time. So it's pretty phenomenal. Aspiring leaders whose brand stands out will be obvious to those seeking people to fill leadership roles. Okay, so if you're aspiring to be a leader, and you need to think about that seriously, by the way, but if you're aspiring to be a leader and you choose that as your career path in life, how your brand will say a lot to whoever's watching you, whether it's the employees, whether it's your boss, whether it's customers, whether it's the organization in general that's around you, people you work around. It says a lot about you. And that is the thing that rises up above everything else that people can see and they grasp and bring those people forward in the organization. Hoping they will be successful. It's not how many hours you work there or your loyalty to the company or anything like that. It's more along the lines of the brand. Once you decide to become a professional leader, all aspects of your brand are visible and either add to your brand or detract from it. You have to be cognizant about your image and behavior, both in your work environment and your private life. That's something you need to really understand about leadership, different than just being an employee. Your brand is evident 24/7, 365 days a year. Something you need to consider before you decide that you think leadership is great. If you just getting in it for the money or whatever, and you figure, well, when I'm off, they don't have anything to say about it. It's not the case. You see that in our government today. These guys don't leave the executive office of the White House or Congress or the Senate or whatever they're in up there and go home and say, okay, I don't work anymore. Every aspect of their life is visible out there, and their brand says who they are and what they're about. And people are making judgments on that every day, and they will make it on you as a leader also, whether it's on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or wherever you go with this. Leaders' lives change. You can no longer simply be one of the employees who complains on social media. Your social media posts have to reflect your brand and what it contributes to those you lead. Your brand needs to be focused on solutions that improve, not complaints. You need to turn how you communicate around to others and all aspects of where people can see you, and they see you as a leader now. So it changes quite a bit, and you need to be cognizant of these issues before you decide, yes, leadership is what I'm looking for, because it could be that the money is not going to be worth it in the end. We see a lot of that going on in the Me Too movement now. There's a lot of things being shared before weren't shared. People were successful and they get taken down in a matter of hours in some cases. Very successful people. Leadership branding provides a missing link that often exists between the internal leadership development, the training you receive in an organization, and the external customer marketing, the sales side of it. So finally, all of those things that people always ask, is the training worth it? Does it make sense? Branding, if you can get out of training those things that will help you improve your brand as a leader, that will link directly to the sales and marketing of the organization or the promotion of the organization, whatever that might be. That's the value in the branding of your leadership. Now, there are two corporations out there that are facing a brand crisis right now, and they have for different reasons. The first one is Uber, primarily because I'm not sure Uber took the time to truly brand themselves. They just had an idea, they threw it out there, and they ran with it. Their focus was not so much customer service, etc. It was convenience and it was money. And there were, I know a lot of people that you can talk to that will focus you on the whole idea of the largest portion of their business are their contract drivers, and they have virtually no contact, no brand in those drivers' eyes to get them committed and loyal and moving outside of that. These are people who need jobs, and they will work their fingers to the bone. But in terms of the brand, the leadership, what they saw, what they thought the company represented, it would not be a good picture if you were getting groups of people around the table who were their primary source of income, which are the contract drivers. And so they didn't really have a brand in my mind. But you take a group like Facebook. Facebook had a brand when they started. It was clear in Mark Zuckerberg's mind this was a community interface and relationship building software product. And there was a purpose behind it, and that was to improve healthy, friendly communication between people who knew each other. And then somewhere along the line, the brand got lost. It got muddled somewhere. And it became an organization that was collecting information on people that others saw valuable in terms of marketing, and consequently it became a marketing data collection software package. And so there's an example of why you should always continue to look at your brand on a regular basis. They didn't, and they got caught. Their brand slipped away from them. Even Mark Zuckerberg said at a meeting I watched one day, we moved away from our initial focus. Okay, they lost their brand and it got clouded because people weren't continually doing assessments to find out whether they were following their brand, whether their brand was real to people out there. And consequently, leadership and all the employees in the leadership began to pursue the brand that obviously the top wanted to have happen. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Now, a couple of corporations that have successful brands, you saw the video of one, and I think that video was made for the employees and maybe the shareholders of the company. And that was Apple. Apple's had a consistent, innovative approach to creating communication for the world to make it different and better. Some way, always being different, always something new, always something out of the blue coming up with it. Amazon was very focused on simply getting things to people cheaper and faster. And that has been their brand from the very beginning, and it is their brand today. Even as they elevate or vertically integrate into different companies like grocery stores and maybe pharmaceutical or medical, they have that capacity to do that. They're known for innovation and customer service, both of them. They draw a loyal customer base, and leaders need to be, they need that same presence with their employees, bosses, and associates as these companies, Apple and Amazon, are doing as organizations. You need that same kind of outward look. People need to be able to know who you are, what you're about, and how they can count on you to do how they can count on you to help them do what they need to have done. So I thought that was a very important aspect of what's going on in that light. Now, having seen all that, knowing, that that's what you need is that outward focus that represents who you are inwardly, what are your behaviors that you'll need to have in an organization? They're going to vary according to organizations, but there are some baseline building behaviors that typically characterize organizations with a successful leadership brand. And we're going to go through some of these, and actually this comes from a very significant individual who consults in the branding area. And these basic building behaviors mirror so much of what we presented over the last 8 weeks. It is just pretty phenomenal. Makes me feel pretty good that I was pretty much on the money, and that these are important aspects for you building a brand as a leader that can make you successful because you're impacting all of those stakeholders out there who are counting on you to lead them effectively. So let's take a look at a few of these basic building blocks. Credibility. Credible leaders encourage open and honest discussion. They maintain confidentiality, and they inspire confidence. And these are the same things we talked about in our very first leadership talk show on Expert Power Bases by French and Raven. You will see this if you go back and look at the video and you research some of those areas in French and Raven. You'll see that credibility evolves out of this expertness that leaders have, that employees admire and want to follow. Trust. To build trust, leaders need to demonstrate knowledge and expertise, as well as fairness and integrity. They should also recognize the importance of establishing of a good rapport with their employees. And this was very much stated in a couple of series sections we did. One we'll mention in a minute again, but it was also very much discussed in that first talk show about power bases and culture building and the values and the core values and the belief systems you have and how they so much drive your ability to emit who you are as a leader, sort of branding your leadership. And these play out vary in many ways, but one important way is if you really have a handle and grasp on this, when you go to look for a leadership position, you have a lot of information to decide whether the position you're applying for, good or bad, maybe it's the best position in the world, but if it doesn't fit your brand, if the role of that position, if the culture of that company does not fit your brand, it is not worth going into the organization. So when we work through branding and you use the stuff we've presented over the last 8 weeks, get a chance to see not only how to be effective in a leadership role, but how to select the leadership roles that you are most likely to be the best at. Another basic communication is another basic building tool. Enhanced communication skills are a must for all leaders. The ability to establish rapport, interact with, and influence people at all levels, and articulate information, and check that the message has been understood, as well as challenge ideas appropriately. Communicating. We take it for granted every day. Every day we do it, and we just assume everybody understands what we mean, and we find out that's not true. And this is where we spent a lot of time, well, not a lot of time, about 40 minutes, discussing communication as a vehicle for establishing trust. Okay, so we mentioned trust up above here, and now here it is, not only in that power basis, but it's also in that presentation I did on communication and trust building. And that's why it was so important to sequence those lessons or those shows in the way I did, because they build upon each other. And now we are again. People are coming from a whole different source of information explaining these same things as very important for your branding, your leadership, so people can see who you really are and what you're really about. Consistency, often overlooked. This is an important collective skill for the leaders. It's about the ability to adapt to new or changing situations and strive for stability. Above all, it means reacting in a predictable way to unpredictable situations so that employees know where they stand. In the middle of all of the chaos, they can count on you. You're like a rock, okay? You're like a calm surface in the middle of a rough sea. You are consistent. You are predictable. That predictability means so much in getting confidence in people and inspiring them to follow you. And that was also discussed in talk show number 5. Resilience. Resilient leaders show self-confidence and composure. They're quick to resolve conflict and maintain a rational and calm approach when facing challenges. They also avoid blame and self-criticism. And really where we saw this come to light was the show we did on ethics and morals, which people really shy away from for some reason, but are absolutely critical to branding your leadership in a positive, effective way that will inspire people to follow you down the right path. Now, this is all relevant. Interestingly enough, you can be a charismatic leader and get people to follow you down a path that takes them over the cliff. We saw this with a lot of cults. We saw this with Adolf Hitler in Germany. We saw this with a lot of people who have followers who believe in them because they have nothing else to latch on to. They have virtually no other hope. And they're praying against hope that, this leader will make the change. The problem is if the leader is unethical and immoral, they will take people down the wrong path. So ethics and morality are absolutely critical in branding your leadership so that people know that you don't necessarily, that you subscribe to the fact that the end doesn't justify the means, that the means are critical, that it's important how you get where you're getting in order to sustain what you're going to have over the course of time. We saw how empires, the Roman Empire, Alexander the Great, I mean, you go back into history and look at all, Napoleon, look at all the people who fell. They were leaders. They were inspirational. They had a lot of things. They had, in many cases, they had credibility. People trusted them. They were charismatic and good communicators, and they were basically consistent down the road. Where they fell apart was ethics and morality. And it caused the collapse of empires in their cases. So on a smaller scale, on a more micro scale, that's what happens in companies when you have leaders who are not ethical or moral from that perspective. Their brand, they get branded the wrong way, and they get fought the whole way. Everything is a fight. It's frustrating. Stress levels are high. You see that everywhere you go. That's what's going on when that happens. So with all of that information, knowing you have those basic core capabilities that make up your brand, and you need to understand the role that you're going to be going into and the expectations of what people and stakeholders in those roles have of you. You have to begin to figure out how do I get a hold on whether I have the right brand for this leadership role that I'm looking at or about to be shoved into or currently have and may have changed, okay? All of those represent the need to take a look at or assess your brand. And so you do that for several different reasons, for several different ways, okay? Assessment is continually important. Remember I told you Uber didn't understand they didn't have a brand because they never assessed it. And Facebook lost it because they never took the time to reassess whether they had consistent behaviors with the brand they initially established or they went far afield. So assessment on an ongoing basis is critical to your leadership brand. So as a leader, you want to know, am I really where I need to be here on an ongoing basis? Are people really seeing me the way they used to see me? Are they seeing me the way they need to see me? Those are things you need to ask. So you have to discern what are the expectations for the defined leadership role. And where do you find that out? From your customers, your stakeholders, the employees, the bosses, and the associates or people you work around or will be working around in the organization. They have expectations of that leadership role based on the environment and the culture that's been established. And you normally find that out by administering or putting out some sort of assessment, whether it's a dialogue where you go out and interview, or whether it's a paper and pencil instrument, or whether it's a computer-based instrument. But what you want to do is you want to get a handle on all of these people, not just the employees who work for you, or not just the bosses, okay? You want a good handle what we used to call a 360-degree assessment of all of these stakeholders, so you get a good idea of what these expectations are, what the brand is they're looking for to be successful as a leader in that role you're about to get into. So you survey employees and followers. You can survey them with instruments, you can survey them or assessment instruments, or you can survey them with dialogue or meetings or discussions, one-on-ones, however you want to do that. But you've got to get a hold of what their expectations are. You want to do that for your leaders. Same thing for your leaders, same thing for the customer and stakeholders. And the best way to do that really is, and we talked about this in the last program we did, in fact, believe it or not, and that was the leadership development program. We talked about third party or assessing and the need for third party assessments and the use of instruments and a combination with interviews and the consolidation of data so that you can get a clear picture of what people are sensing about you as a leader and about what that role, what's expected or what brand is expected out of that role and what those behaviors are associated with that brand. All of that comes out in these assessments and these evaluations of the role itself, where you currently are in the role. And then you know where to go from that point forward. And really, that very often ties to a culture assessment and specific leadership skills assessments that go along with that. Because the culture often will determine the purpose and the position and the direction of the role you'll be assuming as a leader. And that's set sometimes by the organization, but the most important person will be you who sets that culture for that role. So when you think about those characteristics we talked about earlier, the ones on those basic behaviors we talked about, and you go back and listen to all of these shows that I presented you the last 8 weeks and get a good handle on what all of those behaviors mean, you can see the type of culture that will be formulated. And you can see, if you assess yourself as a leader, whether those leadership traits, whether that brand is driving the right culture for your stakeholders, your customers, your employees, your stakeholders, and your associates. You get a good handle on whether that culture is right based on how you're leading and what those skills are we were talking about earlier, how they're playing out in creating the right culture for you. Okay, so assessment is very critical and it's an extremely important thing to do. So you'll want to do that, and most particularly from an organizational point of view, an overall point of view. And lastly, like I just finished saying, if you don't want to get off track, if you want to continually get better, then you're going to reassess regularly because so much changes in the outside world around you as a leader. You want to make sure that you're on the right track in terms of your brand and what the organization is expecting. If the organization makes a shift, it's not aligned with your brand as a leader, you have some choices to make. Either you're going to make some changes as a leader and stay with it, or you're going to say, that's going down the wrong approach. It's not for me. I need to find something else. Thank you very much. Here's my resignation. 30 days from now, I'll be doing something different. So that's the important part about branding relative to understanding where you are in the organization and how well you're doing. Is if you have a solid brand, you're clear about that, you're convinced it's right, and you're on the right, this is what you want to be about, this is who you are. it makes those decisions about staying or not staying very clear. And whether the organization you have is the one you want to be in, or whether the next organization we'd like to be in, your brand would fit that organization. If it doesn't, back away. Don't go there. It's not worth the effort. It's not, it's not worth the ulcers for the money. I promise you that. You will see the difference real clearly. And then, in the end, as a leader, as you're moving these things together, you can look at your performance criteria, what you're trying to achieve. Better widgets, more widgets, newer widgets, lower cost widgets, whatever they're going to be, that all should be tied into your branding process. You should see the performance improve and work through based on your brand. So you can kind of see why branding is very important. And here are the benefits of branding. You become a more authentic leader, and therefore you're going to deliver more impact. Okay, that's important. You're going to be authentic. You're going to be seen as real because you are who you are and you know who you are. You're not trying to fake it. It can help you stay focused on more important challenges of your leadership role when things are really chaotic and going crazy and things aren't lined up like they're supposed to be. Having that clear brand gives you a lot of ability to clear the clutter away and see the path forward. That's important. That's the stability a brand can give you. You will be you will be in a stronger position to meet or exceed your stakeholder expectations when you have a clear brand. Your leadership becomes more in line with the organization's marketing and goals. You can see that. If you've taken the time to assess all of that, and then you come back and you apply what you need to apply in terms of the right brand, and it aligns with the organization, of course, you're going to be seen as a strong contributor to the organization. You'll actually have more confidence as a leader. Confidence is, you can't buy enough of it. You just can't buy enough of it, particularly when something difficult arises or a difficult decision arises. You have the confidence. You have a real clear base that you're standing on, that with a lot, and the values and the culture and all the characteristics, the character behind you as a leader. So when you have to make those decisions, even though they're not fun and they may not even turn out well, you still can make the decision. That's the key part. Employees, team members, and associates will become more inspired to follow you as a leader. I cannot emphasize how much I really believe inspiration is the whole secret to leadership. It is all about evolving who you are and what you're about that inspires people. Your inner self is shown in your brand, and from that, people align with you. They're inspired by you. They choose to want to follow you. They choose to want to excel beyond what they normally can do for you. Okay? This is what leadership is all about. This is where you get a great, great sense of accomplishment from somebody in that process. So it's pretty phenomenal when you think about it. Branding is perhaps one of the most important things you can do in ensuring your leadership success. And I think you will find it very helpful in the long run. You should you should take the time to do this right. And one of the things that I do have available that I'll just show you here came out of several of these articles that I read and researched on branding. Let me go back to sharing my screen a second here. And there we go. And what I want to do is I want to share this with you right here. This is actually my group Facebook page. So you'd have to join the group to get to this because this is where I put it. But here is a form that I put together on some of the stuff that I've talked about this evening that can actually allow you to walk through the process of putting a brand together or branding your leadership, so to speak. And if you go in here and you join the group, you go in here and this will be at the top of the page. It's pinned to the top of the page. You just click on it. It will take you over to the Google Forms. Okay. So the Google Forms, I'll need your address simply because that's the only way I can get your results back to you if you take it. But you just need to know I don't spam anybody. I don't give this to anybody else. I don't sell the information to anybody else. Everything I do is free, so there's no reason for me to do that. So everything here, you can put in your email address, and there's a questionnaire. What results do you want to achieve in the next year? What are your expectations of those you are working for? And of course, that means you have to go out and ask some people. That's what we were talking about earlier. Now, what role best describes the role that you're going to be in? Is it a more directive role? Is it a more collegial or collaborative role? I was talking about a bunch of principals, and I asked them this question, and like 95% of them said the role is a very collaborative, collegial role with teachers, parents, and kids. So that's an example right here where you would just check this one here like that. Okay, and then what power bases will best suit your leadership, your brand? And each of those power bases that I've taught, and if you really need to think through them, you can go back through and listen to that video. Those link is in this same post here to my Apple podcast on those. You can go back to the first show and look at all these power bases and learn about them and kind of define which one kind of best suits your brand. Based on your responses from above, you can create a list. And from that list, you go around and ask people whether they believe these are the expectations that your stakeholder, employee, shareholders, etc., and then share it with them and say whether you shared it or not. Then the next thing you do is go start creating your brand. And I can't go to the next level because I didn't put my email address in there. But you can see if you can go there real easy and you can get a hold of that form and you can use that as a guideline. Feel free to just copy it if you want and change it. You can go to these links I'm going to provide you, find out a lot more. But I'm telling you, taking the time to do this, if you're in a leadership role, will make a big difference in your success as a leader, okay, and your future success. It'll make life easier for you. Hopefully, it'll make it more successful for you. You make it more enjoyable, hopefully, that's for sure. So it's just something that you need to be thinking about and working on and putting into your objectives over the next few months to make sure you really have a handle on this, that you can brand yourself well from that standpoint. So looks like we don't have anybody join us this evening. And So I will stop here at, looks like we almost got an hour in here anyway, just talking about branding. And that's good. It's important. This was a longer show, but it's an important show. And from this point on, we'll be looking to find maybe some specific leadership roles and maybe get some people in here in advance, interview them about their particular leadership role, kind of get an idea of how all this stuff that we've discussed is playing out, and how they can enhance themselves as a leader, and the kinds of behaviors that are important to successful leaders, and some of those that maybe get in the way of leaders, because it's important to know those too, so if you stumble into them for some reason, you'll recognize them pretty quickly. So I hope you enjoyed this segment. I hope it's going to be very helpful for you in the future. I know I wish I would have had it about 35 or 40 years ago when I was evolving my leadership and then